Hi folks, this week we are covering the stuff in Chapter 3, which is understanding actually the process of documenting a crime scene with your photos. So remember back to the intro class, a big part of our investigative process is the scientific method, which essentially means facts first, assumptions later. We need to define our problem, collect our data, which is documenting all of our facts, analyze it, which is taking and reviewing our photos, sending evidence to the crime lab for testing, etc., etc. And after we have the analysis done, then we can develop a hypothesis such as, suspect A did it or suspect B did it. And, in analyzing the evidence, we've oftentimes eliminated suspects versus, having this big pool of suspects, and we've been able to limit it down to one or two suspects. We can test that hypothesis by, additional interviews, interrogations with suspects, with additional witnesses, sending the case file off to the DA's office, see what the DA's office thinks if we have a strong enough case for charges, and then if we do, we finalize and have those charges filed. Now, a big part of the use of photography in our crime scene work is what we like to call visual storytelling. That a good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if we take our pictures, we're telling the story of this crime scene. We are showing, here is our problem. We have a burglary at this home. And now we're going to collect the data at this problem. We are going to begin showing the fingerprints. We're going to show the damage to the property. We're going to show where stuff should have been but is now missing because there's dust lines, because there's this big space on the wall where there's a bracket but there's no TV hanging there. Whatever the case may be as in our crime, we're showing all that data. And we're moving through our case from that beginning to the middle to the end. Even crime lab results, we've got documentation of those. We have pictures that we take back at the police department later showing serial numbers on things, showing close-ups where we can't see fingerprints at the crime scene, but we are able to do processing again later at the crime scene to show, okay, here's this fingerprint, this is the fingerprint I send to the crime lab, and the crime lab identifies our suspect as whoever it may be. Now, every photo we take needs to be listed on a photographic log, and these photo logs become rather important for us because here I've got my description of my photo. This is just an example log. Sometimes they can be simpler with just one or two things of information. This one is assuming that we're using an SLR camera, and we're selecting our f-stop and our shutter speed and everything else. Oftentimes you can just be like auto mode and just draw a line across. But here's the thing, if I'm not keeping a log of my photos, I sometimes can have errors. The example I oftentimes give is, say, a fingerprint taken off a doorknob. How many doorknobs are in a house? How many doorknobs have the same color, have the same look? And so if I've got one of my fingerprints that was off of a doorknob in the house that is matched to a suspect who now we're going to move forward and go to trial with, there can be that question of, okay, we would like an enlargement of this photograph. Well, if I've got 4 or 5 photographs of fingerprints on doorknobs, how do I know which doorknob photo was the one that this fingerprint comes from? So if I have a description of the photo, fingerprint on doorknob in, leading to master bedroom, or fingerprint on doorknob leading to storage closet, and my fingerprint card says, fingerprint taken from master bedroom, fingerprint taken from storage closet. This way I don't make the mistake of enlarging the wrong photo and having that big poster size print that we bring to court be the wrong one. So our photo log becomes very important for us in making sure that we have all the details right so we can tell this visual story. When you get into your crime scene, the photographs that we're going to need to take first. One of the first photos we like to take at a scene is the photo placard. And sometimes as we move throughout our crime scenes, I might have a primary crime scene, which is, say like where the actual crime happened, and then a secondary crime scene, maybe where the suspect left some items, a block or two away, and then maybe another secondary crime scene, like when we identified the suspect in the suspect's house. So every time we go to a new location, we take an image of what's called a photo placard. And this is a card that gives us documentation of what our case number is and where these photos are taken from. We would also like to take some overall shots. Some of our overall shots do include our location establishing. So when I am at an address, I need to take a picture of the street sign. I need to take a photo of the front of the structure with the address, if it's a business, with the business names. Then we take our overall, showing the whole picture, showing each room, the four corners of the room, etc. We get into our mid-ranges. With the mid-ranges, what we're doing is we're showing physical objects in the space that are evidence and how they are in that space, what they relate to. Then we get into our close-ups. The close-up images show the details of the object, show what it is that we're looking at, and the details of that object given the limitations of our camera. Sometimes we need to do additional close-up work back at the PD because we don't have some of our close-up lenses. When we talk about macro photography later in the semester, you'll find out what we're talking about. And for some objects, we do like to add a ruler in there, so we have our close-ups with scale. For some of our scenes, we also like to have the little tents with the ABC 1, 2, 3 numbers. So again, we'll add those later after we have taken our close-ups when it is in its original state. So just an example here. Here's one particular photo placard, and you can say it gives us our date, time, our agency, our case number, photographed by. This particular one does not have information as to what our location is, and that's one of the things I'd really like to have on most of our photo placards. So I would like to have like case number ABC 1, 2, 3, whatever our case number is, and then have location 1, 2, 3 Main Street, victim's house, and then the next photo placard would be the same case number, and then it would be 527 Elm Street, suspect's house. So we know where these photos are taken at as it relates to this particular case number. This particular photo placard has this grayscale down the side, has these colors. This is a way for us to white balance our cameras, so under certain lighting conditions, colors can be kind of muted, colors can actually be changed. The old cliche, yellow and blue makes green, so we're outside during an early evening crime scene. You can have very yellow tinted streetlights, and you could have, say, a bluish tinted car, and suddenly now in your pictures yellow and blue makes green, so yellow light on a blue car makes the car appear green in our pictures. So when we have these little color swatches and this grayscale, that's a way for us in post-processing to make sure that we accurately represent our colors and get the camera set up right. We'll talk a little bit more about white balancing later in the semester, but just be aware of that. Oftentimes though, what we end up using for a photo placard is just a page in our notebook. These fancy ones are great. I love having them around, but oftentimes it's just a page in my notebook because I don't always have one of these with me. All right, so that is just kind of setting us up here. I'm going to end this recording now. In part 2, we're going to go through the actual process of location establishing, overall, mid-range, close-up with scale.